geopolitics at the grand strategic level. Politics is when one person gives an order and another person fulfills that order. That expands out into large hierarchical organizations. Rome, they used to call them client-patron relationships. Delivers opportunities, and a client who fulfills their part of the bargain by doing what's requested of them. That's how it expressed itself in those times. And it's changed very little. The basis of geopolitics is the fact that the ability to muster resources from the land gives you the ability to give out those resources and thus establish client-patron relationships. Obviously, in the beginning, these started as families and that sort of thing. Let me give an example here. Sections of Japan that were rich, flat rice-growing regions.
Crazy rice farms.
Became the basis of powerful clans, and it was the negotiation of those clans via warfare that allowed them to negotiate the final outcome of who would actually control Japan when it became politically unified. That's why the capital moved from Nara to Tokyo. So now that we understand this basic point, let's ask ourselves the question, which continents are capable of being politically unified into a single political structure? Well, Antarctica, no, because there's almost no one there, and at the moment it's resource rich but unexploited because there's better resources everywhere else. Speaking of, okay, Africa, geopolitically speaking, can't be united because it's a series of plateaus, and although it's resource rich, you can't really bring it all into one large defensible unit. The North doesn't have anything, and the place where the resources are has historically been pretty contested. Okay, let's look at South America. South America has a central, mostly impenetrable forest and a massive mountain range that's hard to cross. That makes it economically problematic to unify. Then, okay, you can argue Argentina's got a fairly large, sort of flat growing region. That's why Argentina used to be rich. But the structure of it is largely that there are cities around the coast, because it's much cheaper to ship over the ocean than it is to carry them by land. Australia, well, Australia is almost nothing. It's got 4 cities, 1 in the west, 3 in the east, and then the rest of it is largely unexploitable unless you dig it up and ship it to China. Okay, yes, there's raw resources, but in terms of how many human beings it can actually hold, not that many. North America. Well, and this explains why North America is geopolitically so powerful. It has 2 large moats, a mountain on either side, and then in the centre, and here one basically relying on Peter Zion's analysis, massive river delta. Again, it's cheap to ship things by river, and a massive food growing region in the middle, and people growing region. Can the North American continent be unified under a single policy? Demonstrably, yes. You could argue NAFTA kind of integrates Mexico and Canada if you're feeling generous, I suppose. The United States politics is fractious because it's probably at the maximum size that a single polity can stand, growing to before it starts to fall apart and crumble. We have one left, the interesting one, Eurasia. Okay, so Mackinder makes this argument. The heartland is the centre of the Eurasian continent, and then the rimland is the area that's fought over. Those are the shadow zones, and then everything else is on the outside, and they can launch attacks on, but they can't really control it. And that's why he regarded Eastern Europe as so important, because whoever controls that area, that part of the rimlands, can eventually control the heartland. What's interesting is the heartland, in this case, controlled by Russia, doesn't really have much of an exit north. You can't invade over the ice caps, or at least not when he was arguing it. And the rimland, therefore, is what he calls a shadow zone, and that's why there's constant wars there. Look at that. The 2 major wars that are going on at the moment are in those zones, and the next zone of major tension over in the east is also there. How interesting. Okay, then also there is Mahan, this guy, Alfred Thayer Mahan, who made a bunch of arguments about naval power. We're going to take a case study, in this case, the relationship of the United Kingdom to Europe, which is that every country that has land and ocean has to decide how much of its resources to put towards naval power and how much to put towards the land army power. The United Kingdom was freed up when it was unified because it could put all of its resources into its navy and very little into its army, and therefore that allowed the British Empire to grow to extremely large size. So because the UK is freed up to spend its money on navy only, and therefore expand its empire so it can control trade routes and make heaps of money and become powerful. It means that it also eventually they realised actually it doesn't matter. They don't have to fight on the continent so long as they maintain a balance of power, so long as no one controls the entirety of Europe, which would, if it came under a single polity, would be able to muster enough power to cross the channel and take over the UK. That's why the UK constantly acts as a splitter and divider in Europe. What's interesting about that is that's exactly the same relationship that the United States has to Eurasia as a whole, and that's why there's a special relationship, because their interests are exactly mirrored. That's the bit that I forgot to add here before. Eurasia is the world island, and all of the other continents are islands that are off it. So you could make the argument that Eurasia is the world. Where I differ from Mahan and from Mackinder is that I believe that there is a maximum size that political structures can reach before they start to crack and fall apart, and that Eurasia is too large. So therefore it cannot be unified under a single political entity, which is the reason why things like domino theory ended up being wrong. But nevertheless, we do have clusters of power. Obviously, on the European peninsula, it is very difficult to unify politically. We see attempts at it, like the EU and Napoleon, to unify Europe, but that has never successfully been achieved, because the Northern European plain allows the constant movement of armies very easily east to west, but also the mountain ranges mean that there are problems trying to unify. So if France wants to invade Germany, then they can't really invade Italy, or if they want to invade Italy, then that opens it up for Germany, and there's all of these kind of balance of power metrics that are going on. We're not going to get into the details of that. Okay, then you've got India, which it can be unified to a degree, but it's under constant renegotiation. China, with its 60-year cycle of unification and falling apart again, basically constitutes a series of coastal trading cities and one large rice-growing region that is the heart of its power there. And obviously then you've got Russia, and in one of the greatest historical ironies, Russia doesn't really have access to warm water ports. Yes, there's some in the east, but they're so far away that it doesn't really function. And then trying to get access to the Black Sea, well, then you're still being policed by Turkey, even if you can manage it, and it's problematic. Okay, then you've got the St. Petersburg one, okay, but then Denmark and Sweden kind of block off the Baltic Straits, and then you've got Archangel. Okay, you export via Archangel, but then that's closed in the winter. So, which continents are capable of being politically unified under a single structure? Australia, but it doesn't have enough mass to become a global player. And the United States, which is both capable of being politically unified and has enough mass to become a global player. Which state is the global hegemon? Oh, it's the United States. Look at that. So that's how I think about the basics of why politics in the world plays out in the way that it does.